in Gaza remains dire. Far too many Palestinians have been killed, especially children. Far too many remain incredibly challenged in terms of their access to food, to water, to medicine, to the essentials of life. So it's imperative that we see a substantial and sustained increase in the assistance that's getting to them, as well as to the protection of civilians in general.
Let's discuss this now with Abdullah Baabood. He's the chair of the State of Qatar for Islamic Area Studies at Waseda University and joins us from Oman's capital, Muscat. Thanks for speaking to us on TRT World. Now, why do you think we're hearing this about turn from the US, especially when it comes to protecting civilians, when it was Antony Blinken who just last month bypassed the US Congress and approved a massive sale of weapons to Israel, as well as a package of humanitarian aid?
I think the United States is coming under a lot of pressure, basically domestically, but also they're worried about a regional war, because what we've seen is that Hezbollah is upping its strikes against Israel, also in retaliation to Israel's assassination of leaders in Lebanon. We've seen also Iraq is getting involved, Syria as well. And also Israel has not been able to fulfill its objectives, that is declared objectives, and hasn't been able to show anything that can show, that can demonstrate that they're winning this war. In fact, it's costing them a lot in terms of military personnel and equipment that they are losing. Also, I think they're trying to pressurize Israel to move away from its current policy to what they call is the third stage, whereby there are some surgical strikes, because the current war adds, of course, to the increasing atrocities that the IDF is committing in Gaza, but it's also costing Israel heavily. And this is actually a good ground for the resistant movement, because they are facing it's a city war, which they are good at, and they want them to move from that into some more targeted strikes. So I think the United States is also facing challenges in the Red Sea as well, and I fear that they are really worried about the whole region becoming involved in a regional war. And I think this is one reason for his visit.
Abdullah, do you think when you talk about the regional war, the US obviously has very important relations with Middle Eastern allies when we think of Jordan or Saudi Arabia, and it's not just economic, but political and military too. Does Blinken now have to juggle Washington's interests between Israel as well as the US's interests with the Arab world?
Yes, absolutely right. But also, let's be absolutely clear on this. Not all the Middle Eastern states are on the same page when it comes to the war with Israel. Some of them are not as critical of Israel, and some countries in the Middle East have normalized relations with Israel, and they don't want to do anything that will jeopardize that. Basically, where the Palestinians are getting support is from what is known as the Arc of Resistance, and that is the Iran-led groups. That is, of course, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Hezbollah, of course, Gaza, but also the Ansar Allah, the Houthis. The other Arab states obviously are ashamed of what is happening, because they haven't really done much. Very few of them have actually spoken hard about this and loudly about this. And what also we hear from some senior politicians who visit the region, that they are not as critical of Israel, that some of the Arab leaders are not as critical of Israel as they thought they would be. And I think also the general public in the Middle East and the Arab world also recognize this. And I believe that they are very angry with the leadership. For example, the Arab League has created a committee to visit and to try and visit other capitals and try to resolve or bring an end to this war.
Abdullah, I'm just wondering, why are some countries in the Middle East and the Arab world not as critical of Israel? Because where we're seeing the most criticism come from are countries that wouldn't normally have ties to Palestine or to Israel, like South Africa, Turkey, Bolivia, who've supported judicial movements against Israel. One would wonder why countries in the Middle East, those, especially those where there has been massive ground support and public support for Palestinians, have not taken broader action against Israel.
Yes, to clarify, I think there have been verbally and publicly critical and calling for a ceasefire, but from what we hear in the private discussions, this is not necessarily the case. And your question is very appropriate. Why? And I think it's because of the short-sightedness of some of the Arab leadership here, and that's particularly because they consider Hamas as part of the Islamic Brotherhood. And of course, Islamic Brotherhood in some of these countries are considered as a terrorist organization. And that is one reason that they are not supporting Hamas and the Palestinians, and they equate the Palestinian with Hamas in this case. The other reason is that they see it as supported largely by Iran, and that they bring in here the ethnic and, of course, the sectarian issue, being Iranian, Persian, Shiites, and they see that Iran is not necessarily their ally in the region, and they don't want an Iran acts of resistance to win. So I think this is some of the main areas, and the other one is, of course, some of these countries have normalized or in the process of normalizing with Israel. And they see that there are economic and political benefits from that, given, of course, that they will Israel will open the door for them in Washington, D.C. and other Western capitals. So they see a benefit from being closer to Israel. And of course, shamefully, they have not stood with the Palestinians in their plight as was expected from their public.
Abdullah Baabood in Muscat, it's really been good to speak to you and get your analysis. Thank you very much.